Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cameras and Coffee, where I am back from my hiatus from this series. And I took a hiatus because literally nothing was happening in the world of photography at all. That's right, I went on hiatus during the two biggest scandals in the photography industry, at least of my lifetime. Maybe, I'm not going to say maybe ever, maybe in the last half century. I'm, of course, talking about Canon and Kodak. Both of them are fundamentally related in nature. They're both failings of brand, but in different ways. We'll talk about Kodak later this week, but today we're going to talk about Canon. Now, Canon released the R5, and there was much to do about overheating, and there's been a lot of study by people who have enough money to do this sort of thing. Oh, darn it. I'll fix that later. About the whole to-do. No, Steinbeck, I need to find the thing. No, you're fine. I just need to pull up an article, pupper. I found an interesting article on eoshd.com, and there's a link to it below. It's called Updated. Chinese user modifies Canon EOS R5 to improve heat management, but finds artificial firmware time limit. This is from August 10th, and it was written by Andrew Reed. The general gist of this article, it's really worth interesting. It's a really interesting read, worth reading, because they show a lot of photos of the inside of the R5. Here, Pop, why don't you scoot over and let me see. I feel like I'm off the camera, Pop. Yes, I do. Okay, that's a little bit better. Yes, it is. You aren't allowed to sit in the middle of the camera, Pop. This is not your show. This is my show. Yes, it is. Okay. So basically, a Chinese user engineer disassembled an EOS R5 with the aim of studying the overheating, seeing what was going on. And they show some pictures of the inside of the R5. And there's no heat sink on top of the processor. Also, the heat sinks on top of, I think it looks like RAM, direct heat onto the processor. It's sort of the way it looks like you would design a camera if you wanted it to overheat, or if you wanted it to have a short lifespan. And seeing as how, just recently, I was using a Canon 5D to make the video manual for it, and the mirror shot out of the front of it when I was recording the video manual. I'm kind of not shocked to read this. At any rate, there are some other photos I found online, accidentally closed those tabs, that show better what's going on with the construction on this thing. And also, so the Chinese guy, the user engineer, I don't know that he's a guy, or he or she's a guy, modified the EOS R5 to better dissipate heat, found that it did better dissipate heat, and the camera still shut off due to overheating at the same timelines, meaning that there's an artificial firmware component to the overheating issue. At any rate, let's talk about brand, because fundamentally, this whole issue is a failing of Canon's brand. Yes, I know, Steinbeck. I know, we're talking about Canon again. First thing we need to do is ask, what is brand? Brand is not a company logo. It's not the colors they use. It's not the typeface in their marketing. It's not their product. A brand is the emotion and the feeling that consumers have about a company, or specifically the clients, the people who purchase, or the people who could potentially purchase from that company. Those are the most important elements of brand. There are some companies like the BNSF Railway that have a strong brand. I'm never actually going to buy anything from BNSF. but they have a good brand. And I think favorably of them as a company because I know they have a good safety record. Railroads have to. At any rate, so brand is the mental image that consumers and potential consumers have of the company. This issue with the R5 started off bad. Okay, it was overheating. It's a limitation of the hardware. We're putting out cutting edge stuff, things like that. That's completely reasonable. Until someone takes it apart and finds that the engineering and construction of it, assuming all of those photos are actually the inside of the R5, they found that it is designed in a way that is not conducive to it actually not overheating. In fact, it's designed and built in a way that is conducive to it overheating and in such a way that causes critical components to fail. I mean, it's disappointing to hear if that's true, because it points to a company not even attempting to hide planned obsolescence or planned failure on what is a very expensive camera. So my sincere hope, of course, is that there's some completely logical explanation for this. My sincere hope is that somehow an early build got out to this guy's hands, and the rest of them are not like that. If it turns out that the overheating shutdown is actually a firmware issue and can be corrected with a firmware update, that's honestly a bigger problem for me, because that shows intent, not bad design. Bad design can be accidental. Programming that falsifies a camera overheating shows not only intent but group intent to hobble a camera for some reason. It harkens to the computer tampering that happened at Volkswagen in a lot of ways. An event that really hurt Volkswagen's brand. And I suspect that if any of these things that are coming out about the R5 turn out to be true, that will hurt the brand. So how do we fix that? You could have a recall, sure. You could send out firmware updates, sure. That doesn't get to the root cause. Brand failures like this are fixed in one way. Senior management at a company saying, our brand is important. We value it. It is what makes us who we are. And we need to strengthen it and preserve it. And when brand failures like this, if all of these things that are appearing to be true are in fact true, that indicates that many tiers within the company don't have that sense of brand value. If you do have engineers who are designing things to fail, that means that they don't value a brand that stands for a quality product. If you do in fact have software engineers who are programming false limits into the firmware, that means that there is a programming team that does not value giving the consumer a quality product. If those two things went to market, that means there are managers in both of those reporting chains that do not value what the brand means to the consumer and the potential consumer of that product. If what's being reported about the firmware issues and the hardware issues is in fact correct, then what that means is there is a multi-tier failing within the Canon organization as it relates to the corporate value of the Canon brand. Or maybe the Canon brand is planned obsolescence. Maybe it is just awesome marketing, selling a product that is designed to fail. I'm biased. I'm not going to lie on that. I have so many dead Canon AE1 bodies sitting in the room behind me right now because their computers are just failing left and right now, that I am predisposed to think that there is a life cycle built into some of these things. Again, personal bias. Totally admit that I have it and that I'm particularly frustrated about that right now. So at any rate, my personal bias aside about the brand, what is absolutely staggering to me is that if these things are true, that product could make it to market. And the number of people who would have to sign off on a product going to market like that, the number of higher-ups who would have to sign off on it. It's unbelievable to me. It is. I really, really legitimately hope that in the next few days or weeks, what happens is somebody comes out and says, that EOS R5 that was taken apart by the Chinese engineer, it was a one-off. They're not really built like that. Or there was a small production run that had that production error. They're not really built like that. I really hope that happens. I also really hope that Canon is able to come out and say, this firmware issue, it's not an artificial limit, it's a protection limit. Yes, of course, the camera could record 8K for longer. We're putting that limit in the firmware so that it doesn't burn out internal components and so that the camera does last longer. I really hope that comes out and that's what happens and that was the actual intent. Because realistically, one of the reasons that major companies fail is because many levels within that company stop valuing what that brand stands for. Stop valuing creating a product that supports the quality that brand aims to provide. I don't think we have to go far within the photographic industry to find examples of that. Definitely don't have to go far in any industry to find examples of that. Sears, great example. Used to build houses. They sold house kits. The houses they sold were amazingly well built. They had 6x6 supports in places. I think if I remember correctly, one of my friends used to live in a Sears house. If I recall, it had 12x12s for the main supports at the load-bearing walls. No one builds houses like that. That's an amazing level of quality. I went into a Sears a year and a half ago was the last time I set foot in a Sears. I could not get a salesperson to talk to me. I wanted to spend $400 on glasses because I needed new glasses, and that's about how much they cost in California. I could not get a salesperson to talk to me about them. Technology? No, we went to go, when we moved out here to California, we went to go buy a bed at Sears. So actually that was the last time that I was in a Sears, was to buy the bed. Could not get a salesperson to talk to us. It was the same thing we had happen in California when I went to look for glasses. So it wasn't a failing of that California store. It happened here as well. That's a failing of the corporate culture and the investment the staff has in the store as an enterprise. That's just an easy example. Low-hanging fruit. I hate to pick on Sears. They have used to have the world's tallest building named after them. At any rate, they were an American institution. And what happened was mismanagement along all levels of the company, combined with economic factors, caused an erosion of brand. That is what we've seen be at risk for Canon the last couple of weeks. Canon's still at a point where they can turn it around. They can change gears, and they can, if they are savvy enough, find a way to turn this event into something that doesn't reinforce but doesn't erode their brand. And hopefully they're able to do that, and hopefully everything they tell us, if that happens, is true. I remain optimistic, like I've said multiple times in this video, that the engineer in China got a fluke camera that wasn't built correctly. It's a sample size of one that he or she took apart. I remain optimistic that there's some logical explanation for the firmware that hasn't come out yet. So we'll see, but very interesting set of events to watch with Canon, and it'll be very interesting to watch in the coming weeks how they handle it and how the response either protects their brand or doesn't. So that's my rant, quite frankly, about this whole event with Canon and the different things I've been thinking about regarding Canon on the time that I was off taking a hiatus. We'll see about how that plays out, and then later this week we're going to talk about Kodak and the SEC investigation about Kodak and their stock trades, what that means, and we'll try to tease out what that could mean for the future of Kodak. The only reason I'm not doing that video today is because I don't know the answer yet. So I might not know the answer by the time I make that video. We'll see. But we'll cover Kodak later this week. So anyway, have a wonderful day, everybody. Keep an eye out for what Canon does to salvage this whole situation, and remain optimistic that the R5 is, in fact, an amazing camera that is built really well. That's my hope. See you soon.